I had already done nighttime maintenance in the middle of a lot of bad places, substations with the smell of ozone, motels that change their name every season, service tunnels that look like whale lungs. But that night, in the Louisiana countryside, the map played an old trick on me. The road disappeared under the darkness as if someone had pulled the world's tape. The GPS said, "Continue for 8 miles." The windshield said, "Forest." I stopped the truck, left the engine purring and got out with the flashlight. The air had the humid weight of the region, sweet like old molasses, rust, stagnant water. To the left, a fence swallowed by vines. To the right, what was left of a sign, something like Beaumont Estate, letters eaten away by decades. The abandoned mill was right there. I was called because the county needed to make sure that the old power panel, which powered a shared drainage pump with 2 neighboring lots, could still be safely shut off. Paperwork, regulations, nothing romantic. But the road, according to the files, should have been clear all the way to the mansion. Instead, there were roots burrowing through the asphalt, puddles reflecting nothing, and a low chorus of frogs that sounded like an old engine trying to start. I used the high beam to carve out the path and pushed the truck a few more meters. The tall grass scraped the fenders like nails. Ahead, the outline of the mill appeared. Roof fallen on 2 sides, cracked chimney, windows like empty skull sockets. There was a smaller house, what had once been a slave quarters turned into a storage room, and a shed with sliding wooden doors soaked through. I parked between the shed and the mansion. The engine stopped with a sputter that I didn't like. For a second, the silence made everything loom larger. I opened the toolbox, grabbed the voltage meter, the hatch key, wasp spray, because there are always wasps, and walked over to the metal panel on the outside of the shed. As I got closer, the smell changed. The sweetness of molasses faded, replaced by the sour scent of something animal, old urine and worn skin. The flashlight cut through the rust of the cabinet and found the 1978 label, the county seal from 1996, and fresh scratches on the paint, parallel and low. I thought of raccoons, wild dogs, anything with claws. My ear picked up another message. Slow dragging inside the shed. I didn't pass. A dragging sound that traced an S on the dusty floor. I'm skeptical and careful. I knocked twice on the sliding door with my fist, like asking for permission to enter a building that might fall. "County service," I called out loudly, because sometimes human voices organize space. The shed responded with a drop falling from very high and a silence that had weight. I tried to open the door. It gave 6 inches and jammed on something that wasn't the lock. I gently put my shoulder into it until I managed an extra palm's width. The beam from the flashlight entered, hitting fallen shelves, broken burlap sacks, a crooked old plow, stacked tires, and in the center, where it shouldn't have been, a modern blue water tank leaking from the bottom. Over the puddle, deep S marks, recent, still shining with moisture, and crossing the floor to the back of the shed, the track of something heavy, continuous, that had entered and chosen to stay. Animal control, I thought out of habit, and laughed awkwardly. The county doesn't send anyone at this hour. I was there because the paperwork doesn't wait, and the rain forecasted for the early morning could flood half the property if the pump stalled. Either I shut it off and sealed it, or the neighbors would wake up with water up to their knees. I decided to do what I had to do. First the panel, then the shed. The hatch opened with a scream. Cockroaches fled like the wrong confetti. I measured the voltage. 240 V on the line, 0 V on the pump's secondary. It wasn't running. Good. I shut off the main breaker for testing, and at that moment the whole mill seemed to hold its breath. The frog's chorus paused, as if the night's plug had been pulled. That's when I heard it. Not from inside, from outside, right behind me, near my foot. A breath, warm, low. I saw, out of the corner of my eye, the grass laying down in a narrow path coming from the side of the smaller house. I swung the flashlight. The beam caught dark scales glistening wet, a thick body curve disappearing under the shed's partially open door. The trail in the mud was wide, much wider than any snake I had ever seen in the desert. The tongue, I saw too quickly to trust, looked black, short, determined. It didn't rattle. The sound was different, the weight making a decision. I took a calculated step back. The door vibrated as if something passed, scraping inside. The blue tank let out a plastic sigh. The old trail on the ground met the new one like lines on a map. Everything said one thing my brain didn't want to accept. The shed had a resident that had chosen to leave and return often enough to make the trail visible. "Okay," I said to the heavy air. "I'll shut it off, seal it, and leave. Promises that sometimes save the soul." My hand went to the lead seal. The pliers cut. The breaker went down. I felt the silence gain a second tone, as if the mill really was breathing. I took a picture, filled out the app, stamped the time. The correct thing. Enough to say, done. And then the road made me pay for the audacity of coming alone. The truck, when I tried to start it, gave 3 turns of the engine and fell silent. I tried again. The relay's dry click answered no. The headlight faded slowly. The darkness claimed even the things the flashlight couldn't reach. The entire county felt distant. The cell phone had a shy bar that came and went. I turned on the cabin's ceiling light to give myself courage and shut the door, swearing the plop sound was louder than usual. The grass in front of the hood moved without wind, a low line crossing. The S in the mud shone again as it was passed over. Without looking directly, I realized the path went from the smaller house to the shed, from the shed to the back of the mansion, and from the back to a swamp behind the chimney. Animal Street. Plan B, I said to myself. Stay in the vehicle, wait for dawn, call a tow truck and company. The seat embraced me like old furniture, and sleep didn't come, because the mill had its own clocks. Around 2:13, the chimney cracked with a stone-cold sound, and almost at the same time, the grass to the right made that sigh of something large passing underneath. The shed door gently banged, opening a finger's width. The blue tank let out another breath. And then came a sound I knew well, not from a snake but from a rat. A sharp, sudden squeal followed by silence, predator working the shift. That's when the interior light went out. The battery was running out, and I was left only with the flashlight in my hand and the sound of my own blood. The mill wasn't haunted, it was occupied. The sour smell grew stronger, mixed with a background of mold that rises when the night saturates everything. My body asked for the road. The road there was the worst idea. I tried to rationalize. Large snakes in Louisiana aren't a legend, they're geography. Loose pythons, irresponsible pet boa constrictors, old regional ones like eastern diamondbacks, rarer here but not impossible, along with water moccasins in every dark reflection. The body I saw, however, was too thick, wide like a man's forearm, long enough to cross from one building to another in seconds, and calm. The calm of creatures with no enemy there. I made the decision that any manual would disapprove of. Get out of the truck, reach the passenger door, grab the portable battery and second flashlight, and go back. 3 steps, 4 at most. The grass was still now. The shed, breathing low. I opened the door, slipped outside, and the night hit my face like cold water. My feet sank half an inch into the mud when the first sound pinned me to the ground, dry dragging from beneath the truck, literally underneath. The flashlight dropped by reflex. 2 inches from my ankle, a curve of dark scales passing between the differential and the fuel tank, filling the gap as if the truck were a bridge and it a river. I didn't think. I moved up onto the hood. The metal groaned. The creature continued, slow, unhurried, as if my panic had no part in physics. The S crossed under the chassis and exited through the driver's side, disappearing again into the grass toward the smaller house. That path was routine. I was the news. I went back inside, locked the door for no reason, breathed with borrowed rhythm 446, and finally understood what that night wanted, to hold me. Not for the supernatural, not for drama, simply because the exit road had been claimed by Animal Street, and I, insignificant, had to wait for the night to turn into something else. At 3:01, the shed spoke in a new way. A strike, wood yielding, something heavy knocking over a shelf. The sliding door opened a couple more inches at once. The flashlight caught inside a long shadow bending in the corner, disappearing behind the tank. A quick squeak of a rodent, a round silence, My brain drew teeth I hadn't even seen. My body counted steps I couldn't take. At the edge of panic, sometimes we make up games to stay. Mine was to name what I heard. The crack of the chimney, drops from the broken roof hitting the metal. The frog chorus changing pitch with the passing of something big, the sigh of the tank, the drag under the chassis, the non-existent wind. And above it, a new sound every 10 to 12 minutes. 3 spaced knocks on the mansion wall, as if someone with very thick fingers wanted to call from inside. I pointed the flashlight toward the sound and found only empty windows. When the first blade of light detached the horizon from the swamp, the road returned to its right place. The darkness gave a half step. The grass gained the color of life, not poison. I left slowly, checked the ground, saw the S everywhere. Old path, not event. I opened the hood, changed cables, charged with the portable battery. The engine started on the 3rd try, a tired baritone. I should have left straight away, but the rule of the trade bit. I needed to seal the panel with the breaker off and the new seal, sign it, photograph it, prove I didn't run away. I walked to the cabinet. The floor had a new S around the base. I sealed it, photographed it, closed the app, breathed, took one last sweep with the flashlight. The shed's door was open enough for a thin man to pass through. I'm not thin, and I'm not stupid. Still, I took 2 steps inside because curiosity is the snake that inhabits me. The smell pushed me back, sour, greasy, fresh. On the floor dust, round marks here and there, like bellies had lightly brushed as the body passed. And, in the middle of the shed, under the tank, something none of us can call casual. A thick circle of S overlapped, like a crown drawn by scales. A place to sleep, or wait. I went back to the truck without glory. On the way out, the road had returned to being a road, but not for me, not without the taste of the night. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw the mill receding, small, until it turned into a nameless sign. The GPS finally said, "Turn left," and I obeyed like an animal that finds the river again. The forecast was almost right. It didn't rain at night. It poured. By the next afternoon, the county called. The mill's pump hadn't turned back on. The water was rising in the swamp and was already creeping up the neighbor's access road. "It's near where you were yesterday. Can you check quickly? Just the basics. Bring the battery, confirm if the breaker is really off, check if the line didn't short out, and see if you can turn it back on for emergency." The radio went silent half a second after the word emergency. I knew the way, and the way knew me. When I arrived, the road had already turned into a memory. The water covered the asphalt in sheets, not deep but deceptive, reflecting the sky, hiding holes. I drove the truck slowly, creating a V of waves that hit the tall grasses like cold kisses. The mill appeared, smaller under the grey sky. The shed, the blue tank, the mansion. Everything seemed swollen with humidity. I stopped in the same clearing from yesterday, my breath short as if the place required an entrance fee. The pump cabinet was waiting for me with the seal intact. I opened it. The rain tapped on the metal, creating a rhythm that masked other sounds. I measured the voltage. 240 Vi on the line, 0 on the secondary. I tried to turn it back on. The breaker cracked, recoiled, as if the circuit had turned into muscle. "Short," I said aloud, to someone who didn't need to know. Water ran behind the shed in new grooves. The puddle under the blue tank had overflowed and turned into a small lake. In the mud, the S I had already named repeated its calligraphy. Back and forth door tank swamp. I had 2 bad choices: leave and wait for the county with a full crew and watch the neighbors lose land until then, or go into the shed to check the line that fed the pump's motor, from the floor under the tank to the internal machine room, a cubicle in the back. My body said, "Go back." My hand grabbed the heaviest flashlight. I pushed the sliding door with my shoulder. It opened reluctantly to the same width as the night before. The water sheet on the floor reflected my beam. The sour smell hit harder, mixed with fermenting mold. I took 1 step inside, 2, 3. The sound of rain outside turned into distant music. Inside, every drop that fell from the broken roof worked like a metronome for something that didn't need time. I closed my hand around the lantern's handle. The bulb flickered once, nervous like me. The The sliding door behind me moved a centimeter, just enough for me to register that the night liked theater. I turned my torso without turning my legs, keeping the ground on the map. "Don't make a movie," I whispered. The blue tank sighed, a snap of contraction caused by the cold. Under it, the darker water made circles in a rhythm that wasn't droplets. I dragged the beam across the floor and saw again what had seemed exaggerated yesterday. The overlapping S circle, thick in the center. Waiting place. The stacked tires on the left had marks around them, round touches repeated like bellies searching for edges. The pump cubicle in the back, a rusted metal door, opened by 2 fingers that weren't mine. Work. Do work. I went to the cubicle, each step a negotiation. The old wooden floor complained like a tired house. Inside, the electric motor took up half the air. I got close to the internal breaker and noticed something that belonged in another type of report. Marks in the dust on the panel at the height of my hip, not of a hand, of a body. A curved line that ended at the edge where someone, or something, had pressed hard. I licked my dry lips. I opened the box. Old wires, dried tape, the underground entry through galvanized conduit, with bites in the outer insulation. Rat, right? I prayed it was. I manually disarmed the internal breaker, tested continuity, and tried to isolate the leg that was shorting out. A dry snap, a brief spark, the smell of hot plastic. The panel responded with honesty. Not today. I closed the box, lowered my arm, breathing deeply. The tank cracked again, now lower, and the beam from the lantern drew a wave in the dark lake. Then came the sound I feared and expected, dragging, not fast, coming from the door. I turned slowly. I saw no creature. I saw the sliding door move another 2 inches. The wind? There was no wind. The rain doesn't push a door like that. The water, maybe. The shed has its moods, and a memory that happened right in front of me, the long shadow crossing the right side, going from the tire pile to the tank. I didn't run. I pressed myself against the pump cubicle, letting the metal be my back, as if any wall could turn into a fortress. The dragging continued, drawing its map in the mud. The S circled the tank, disappeared behind broken shelves, reappeared at the door, and stopped there, as if sniffing what it should push. The door trembled, clim, and closed. The sound was small, the effect immense. The rain's sound grew even more distant. The air became still. My heart did the job of breaking the silence. "Open," I said, an idiot. The door didn't listen. I went to it, breathing while measuring the ground. I grabbed with both hands, pulled. Someone, something, had pressed weight on the other side. It wasn't a lock. It was a body. That's when the lantern shook, and the beam found, at an impossible angle, the outline of the back. Dark scales, shiny with moisture, wide like phalanges. A pattern that wasn't a rattlesnake, wasn't a moccasin. It traveled in masses, not in haste. The tongue appeared, black, and tasted the air that came from my fear. There was no strike. There was a message. This is my turn. I pulled my hands away from the door and opened my palms, not knowing for whom. "I'll leave when I can," I whispered, because the gods of darkness like honest promises. Time there became elastic. The tank breathed, the lake made circles beneath, the rain kept its own count. The shadow returned to its round, from the shelves to the tires, from the tires to the cubicle. I, leaning against the metal, became a post. The tongue traced the air again, now closer to my knee. I felt the humid warmth rising. I held the lantern at an angle that wouldn't offend. It passed, it didn't scrape my leg. It scraped the fear from my ankle to my throat and continued its pattern, disappearing again behind the tank. The door then gave a centimeter. I pulled the exact size of permission. It opened another centimeter. I pulled. The shed seemed to decide with me. Each gap that appeared was filled with water and smell. At some point an arm could fit, then a shoulder. I made the gesture I thought was the correct offense to the place, backward, sidestepping without showing too much back, without losing the eye of the beam. When half my torso was already rain, I heard behind me the biggest breath of all, not air, mass. The tank groaned and the lake's water rose a finger. I passed. The door slid on its rails and closed by itself, as if the shed had yawned. Outside, I breathed air that wasn't good. It was just different. The pump cabinet felt like an exhibit in a museum. I sealed it again, now with the not working marked. I took the photos, sent them with a wavering signal, and got the understood from the county. The thin rain fell as if the sky had forgotten. I stayed a few more minutes in the car, waiting for the road to recognize my tires. Before leaving, I looked at the shed one last time. The door was in place. The new S had already turned into a shine in the mud. The mansion, with its 3 imaginary knocks inside the wall, seemed to watch me give up. I started the engine. The tired baritone responded. I steered the truck into the V of the water with the humility of someone who was spared, not defeated. On the way, the road turned into a labyrinth of mirrors once more. I stopped at the rise before the swamp to send a message that I knew would arrive when it wanted. Pump with internal short. Area occupied by probable serpentarium. Needs crew, daylight animal control. Do not send one. I sent it. The rain erased my trail in minutes. That night at the roadside motel, I woke up at 2:19 with the feeling of a door closing by itself. It wasn't mine. It was the shed's, way behind, repeating its music in my head. I kept listening. Nothing, just the air conditioner. I laughed at myself awkwardly. In the next silence, I swear, I heard 2 very light, spaced knocks on the wall of the room. I did what you do when the world decides to tell you a secret you don't want to learn. I turned to the phone side and forced myself to sleep. We returned in 4. Me, 2 from the county, Harper and Ruiz, and a wildlife control officer, Kendrick, with a lasso pole, hooks, containment boxes, and that courage that comes with the morning. Light rain, the road still with sheets of water, and the mill breathing humidity through the cracks. The plan was simple. Isolate the power, open the shed with visibility, inspect the pump line in the internal cubicle, document, and, if necessary, remove the animal that had turned the place into a corridor. Harper checked the cabinet. Seal okay. Breaker off. Ruiz set up 2 portable light towers at the shed's entrance. The clearing turned hospital white, exposing dust in the air. Kendrick fastened the lasso pole to her forearm, tested the soft hook, and nodded to me as if to say, no heroics. We pushed the sliding door. It opened wider than the previous days, but stuck a third of the way. Kendrick pointed the beam at the track, accumulated mud, rust, and a brownish lump in the lower corner inside, which I didn't recognize. She took the hook and poked it. The lump moved and scales shimmered. It wasn't a lump. It was a body coiled against the doorframe, using its own mass as a wedge. Go slow, Kendrick asked, her voice low. Harper and Ruiz held the door at its limit. The animal unwound a bit, not enough to open a path, but enough to warn us that it knew we were there. The black tongue cut through the air, short and methodical. I saw again what had cost me a whole night, the thickness of an adult forearm, wide scales, a dark pattern without the classic diamond, the sheen of someone who lives in wetness. Kendrick shifted her stance, not to capture, to negotiate. Push with me. Don't let go, she said to the others. They pushed. I on the side kept the lantern at an angle that wouldn't offend. The body slid to the center of the shed, drawing the S as its signature. The door opened the next palm's width. We entered forming an L, her in front, me on the left, Harper and Ruiz anchoring the door. The light towers revealed the map I had described. The blue tank with water in a lake, tires to the left with round marks, fallen shelves, overlapping trail circles in the middle. Hand in the back, the pump cubicle door, now open by a whole hand or by mass. Look at that, Ruiz pointed at the tank. At the base, in the shallow water, 3 parallel marks, just like the ones I'd seen days before in the power cabinet, impressions of bellies side by side, as if more than one body had rested with their chin in the same place. Roots, Kendrick translated. Her, and at least one other. Maybe a male, or a large juvenile. We proceeded down the aisle between the tires and shelves. Kendrick walked like someone stepping on eggs that can't be broken or ignored. The first encounter came without drama. The animal was under the fallen shelf, half its body in the shadow, the rest forming a curve toward the puddle. It didn't strike. It lifted its head 3 fingers, the tongue testing the air, black eyes, a calmness that forced our bodies to remember their own edge. "Boy day," she murmured to me. Python or large boa, likely released, escaped. Here they found refuge. Humidity, rodents, engine heat. "Can you remove it?" I asked, knowing the question was more about time than technique. "If she wants to leave," Kendrick answered, and that "if" weighed heavily. The door behind us bumped a centimeter by itself. Harper cursed softly, holding it again. "No wind," he said, as if accusing. The tank cracked, plim, and a small wave ran. The snake's tongue traced longer. Kendrick stretched the lasso slowly, trying to position the nylon behind the head. The animal retreated without retreating. It spread its body, gaining ground where there seemed to be none. "She's using the space," she said. "Don't push now." We went to the cubicle. The internal panel told the same story. Old wires, chewed insulation, galvanized conduit with scratches, as if something heavy had rubbed there many times. The pump, too large for the small cubicle, smelled of unresolved heating. "Short from humidity and trauma," Harper concluded, photographing. "Needs a complete overhaul." On the way back, the house breathed with the shed. 2 light towers made shadows move where they shouldn't. The main animal had moved to the middle circle, waiting place, and a second, smaller shadow was drawing short S-shapes near the tires. 2, Kendrick confirmed, which rearranged our intentions. "We'll remove one at a time, and no one runs." The first lasso succeeded with a small gesture. The head lifted 3 more fingers. The loop lowered a finger less. Kendrick locked and pulled without brutality. The thick back came like wet rope. Harper and Ruiz brought the containment box, lid open, and, in a trained movement, she guided the body portion inside without letting the handle bite. The animal didn't use its teeth. It used weight. The box sank half an inch into the mud. Lid. Locks. Silence. The lake breathed again. "One," she said in a tone that didn't celebrate. The second, smaller one chose the worst place. It circled the tires and aimed for the door's opening. "No," Harper tried to block with his foot. Kendrick lowered the hook pole, deflecting the head, and the shadow passed close to my knee, the tongue cutting the air near the fabric of my pants. I froze without losing the beam. The animal, thin and determined, found the door, and there a third body we hadn't seen lying like a wedge blocked the exit. 3, Ruiz said, almost like asking for time. The smaller one backed off and turned around, choosing the route between the tank and the cubicle. It was in this flow that the shed decided to close its mouth. The sliding door, without a hand, moved 2 palms, pushed by nothing we could blame. Harper held it, cursing again. The water under the tracks was pushing inside, sheet pressing sheet. "Hold it there," Kendrick asked, focused on the smaller one, the lasso descending like the moon. She got it, pulled. The snake twisted the free half, hit my ankle, and I felt the message from the place: "You are in someone's corridor." I helped guide it to the smaller box. Lid, locks. We breathed. The wedge remained, the thick body by the door track, mass turning the exit into an obligation. Kendrick looked at me, then at Ruiz. "Can't drag it from the outside, it has to be moved from the inside." The lasso dropped again, this time to the portion giving access to the neck. If she moves just an inch, the door opens. The nylon touched the scales. The winch. No, there was no winch. There was that low breath of mass in motion. The head lifted enough for her to fit the loop. On the pull, I felt the ground vibrate from my side of the entire animal's body, a deep chord. "Now!" Ruiz and Harper pulled the door. It gave an inch, 2, 3. The light from outside bit the floor. The snake, irritated, responded not with a bite, but with a map. It uncoiled from the track, gained the middle circle in a wide movement, lifted the first third as if reminding everyone of the space hierarchy. Kendrick took a step back without releasing the lasso. "Go to the side," she said, and we obeyed with the gratitude of the living. The door was free. The exit road existed again, open, waiting for tires and choices. We could try to contain it too. Kendrick evaluated, her eyes measuring our time against the creature's time. Not today, she decided. She's bigger than our box, and the place is hers. Without more tools and more hands, we're just swapping chances. Harper wrote it down reluctantly. Ruiz made the sign of the cross with grease and humor. We left backward, no drama, the door opened 3/4. Outside, the air felt like another planet. We closed the larger box on the truck bed. The smaller one beside it breathed quietly. Kendrick sealed, signed, photographed. Relocation authorized, she read, to herself and to the county that would later need the paperwork. The big one stays, with a warning and with respect. In the pump cabinet, I sealed again with a red tag and a note no manager wants to read. Internal short plus animal occupation in shed, restricted access, await heavy team and containment. Harper tapped the lid lightly, knowing that metal has memory. Ruiz placed a yellow tape between the shed and the mansion, marking the corridor, as if a line could prevent an animal from having acquired rights. I laughed inside. Before getting into the car, I looked one last time inside. The light from the towers made the dust turn to snow. The trail circle in the center seemed even more defined, like an imprint crown. The water under the tank held reflections that were eyes when we wanted them to be. And far in the back, beyond the cubicle, a shadow breathed without moving. She stayed, Kendrick said, and it's not punishment. It's a decision. I understood more than I wanted. On the way back, the road, generous, had less water. The sky opened a grayish tear. The county radio asked for my report, and I replied with what the early hours had taught me. Don't send just one. Don't send in the dark. Don't push a door without knowing what a wedge is. On the other side, silence, as if taking notes. Sleeping was half possible that night. At 2:13 I woke up for no reason. The motel was quiet. In my head, 2 light knocks, spaced apart, came from the wall, and I accepted that not everything needs to be superstition. Sometimes it's just memory working through excess. We returned 3 days later, with everything daylight allows and night takes away. A heavy electrical crew, wildlife containment, tape everywhere, cones, radios that worked, and a bobcat machine to move whatever was needed. The sky was low, but there was no rain. The road, still damp, reflected the world in patches. The mill seemed smaller with people. I learned that places that command us shrink when they become routine. Morning plan. Isolate the power from the entire property at the access poles. Open the shed from above with a crowbar to avoid relying on the sliding door. Illuminate the interior in 360 degrees. Access the pump cubicle, disassemble the power supply, remove the motor and old conduit. If the wedge was present, move it with a lasso pole and board without attempting total capture. Reinforce the door, seal it, and leave a formal notice of resident fauna until safe relocation. Harper climbed the utility pole with the skill of someone in a hurry with good reason. The key dropped, and the mill breathed without electricity. Ruiz set up the 4 light towers as if installing a stage. Kendrick checked the lassos, hooks, boxes, and breathed like someone calming even metal. I put on gloves, the work helmet, and leaned my back into the idea that with people, animals respect. Animals don't respect ideas, they respect gestures. The sliding door, as expected, gave 2/3 and jammed. The track swollen, mud in its teeth, wedge likely on the inside. In 10 minutes, we created an opening at the top side with crowbar and bar. The old plank served like bread crust. The light bit dust, tires, stagnant water. The circle of trails in the center was more defined than the previous week, an outline of a ritual no one planned. Kendrick slid the lasso pole through the top, drawing the arc of patience. "There," she said, pointing with her chin. The wedge rested against the track, dark mass, thick, warm in the cold, using its own body to make a door, a wall. "Push with the board," Ruiz suggested. We brought 2 plywood boards, slid one on top, the other on the side, like releasing a stuck boat without hurting its hull. Kendrick touched the visible portion with the soft hook. The back trembled, not in panic, but in calculation. The tongue appeared, black, twice. "Now," she said. We pushed with the board. The body gave an inch, unwinding the S like untangling a knot. The sliding door moved 3 fingers. The track spit out mud. That's when we saw, for 1 second that doesn't repeat, the head emerging from the opposite side, near the tire pile. A thick triangle, black eyes without shine, a pale scar on the back near the neck, the mark of life that had fought and won. It raised the front third, not as a threat, as a rule. Kendrick froze the lasso halfway. "No capture," she declared, changing the plan in midair. "Just move it. Today we reopen the path." The hook passed under the neck with an indecent gentleness. We pushed again. The door opened another inch. Harper and Ruiz held the door with the weight of the plan. I kept the board firm against the wedge's belly, feeling the animal's vibration through the wood fibers, an old, deep rumble that climbed into my teeth. "Go," Kendrick asked, voice like someone making a pact. We stepped back, 1 step, 2, 3, widening the gap. The wedge, reluctantly but elegantly, migrated to the center circle, the very first position of someone who calls the house their own. The passage was open enough to enter carrying and exit carrying. The electrical team advanced in block. Quick disconnections, identified cables, loose old conduit, motor out of its cradle, pallet with ratchet. The cubicle emptied of function, side dust from 30 years ago. "The pump is dead," Harper signed with a sad satisfaction. But we're not. In the middle of the work, the shed tested the lesson. The wedge described a perfect semicircle between the tank and the tires, raised the first 60 centimeters of its body again, and rested its head on the wooden column that supported the roof. It didn't strike. It rested. Tap. Tap. Twice, spaced apart, as if confirming the rhythm of the place. Those 2 knocks had been repeating in my head since the first night. "She marks," Kendrick whispered, "says here to herself, and to us." We proceeded without haste, as the manual of not dying commands. Carrying a motor demands synchronized bodies, and inside it was synchronization with the animal. When we crossed halfway through the shed with 200 pounds of iron strapped to us, the wedge chose our column as decoration. It passed behind us, brushing the board and ankle, an embrace that didn't want affection. I felt the warmth of its skin, warm and wet, and the world reduced to don't look, don't run, don't fall. 4 steps later, we were in the outside air. The motor went into the truck bed as if it were saved food. We entered again to retrieve the old conduit line, so rust wouldn't turn into an open wound. The wedge returned to station at the exit track, less pressed than before, like a measured protest. Kendrick touched the hook to its neck with the respect of opposites and pushed an inch. The door opened another inch. I smiled grimly, thanking physics and the animal in the same prayer. Outside, we applied the yellow tape with the text that places like this understand: restricted access, equipment removed, resident fauna, entry only with containment. Paper in the cabinet, pump removed, power isolated at pole, schedule reinstallation in external pump house, far from animal corridor. Harper signed. Ruiz stamped it. Kendrick drew a small triangle at the edge of the report, a personal talisman or just a field mark. Before leaving, I took 3 steps back to the threshold. The circle on the ground seemed darker, old water marking the outline of a kingdom. The wedge rested in the middle, head down, tongue testing the new geometry of the air, open door, damp track, absence of motor. "Not today," Kendrick told me, reading my face. "You've learned. The road, when it disappears, is sometimes just an animal saying, wait." On the way back, the road returned us without story. On the radio, the county scheduled the work. Prefabricated pump house, elevated base, doors with bars that animals can't push, new cables in aerial conduits, no excuse to repeat that corridor. "And the shed?" I asked. "Permanent notice, removal with specialized team when we get a bigger box and a cold time window," Kendrick answered. "Until then, it's the house of whoever fits." The next night at home, the world returned to having 4 walls that only creaked. I woke up at 2:13 by reflex, the clock the road had installed, and heard what I wanted, nothing of tap, nothing of dragging, only the air of unity condensing on the metal I paid for, and a lesson placed in the right spot. Doors are sometimes not doors, sometimes they are animals. If you push, they close more. If you respect, they open.